Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Steel City Blitz Steelers Podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. We are in the final days of July. The Pittsburgh Steelers have reported to training camp, albeit a slightly different training camp. Okay, not slightly, significantly different training camp than the previous 50-some years in which they would have been at St. Vincent College in Latrobe. Instead, they are at Heinz Field and, of course, the Southside facility there in Pittsburgh. And we're going to dive into everything that's going on, will go on, and a whole lot more that is happening with the Steelers and around the NFL. And joining me as usual are Ben and Ian. And Ben is recovering from a quick power outage out where he is, and thankfully everything is up and running. Ben, everything's fine now?
Yeah, it's fine.
So far, so good?
There was a moment of panic when I thought my air conditioning wasn't gonna be working for the next few hours, and still 95 out. And
whoa!
Yeah, it's that would have been a little difficult.
That's some
to deal
heat.
With.
Yeah. That
95 degrees. I mean, 28% humidity, so it's like nothing.
Right. Yeah,
not like where you live.
No, it's where you're sweating before you even hit the doorway. Of course, then I'm not. Texas is far worse, so I'm not going to complain. Anyway, and Ian, how are you this fine evening in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Doing good. The Pennsylvania High School Sports Association met yesterday and decided that they will be having high school sports this fall without spectators is one key thing. And they, schools have to follow some very strict regulations, but they did kind of leave it up to the districts as far as when they actually wanted to start sports. But they're allowing them to happen. So teams are moving ahead with their plans and figuring out how to comply. So it's pretty exciting in the high school sports realm, which we cover a bit on SteelCityBlitz.com. Actually, on that note, exciting news: we have a new sponsor of our WIPIO content, the Small Player Big Play app, which is available in the App Store for both Androids and iPhones. And basically what it is it enables people at games, whether they be affiliated with a team or not, to broadcast a game kind of like Periscope was, for instance. So you can stream a game on there that you're attending, and then other people can go on there from sitting at home and pay essentially the price of a ticket to watch the game that's being broadcast. And so this is going to be a really big asset for high schools in our new COVID world that fans can't go to games, so you can should be able to watch games from home. And the really cool thing about the Small Player Big Play app is that it's a fundraising effort with the schools as well. So when people go on and subscribe to watch the app, they can put in what school they want to be affiliated with, and about 80 to 90% of the money they would pay for the app, or not the app, sorry, the app is free, but what they would pay to watch the game actually goes to the school. So kind of like the price of a ticket, when you would buy a ticket to a game, the school gets some revenue from that. This is just, you're doing it over an app instead, but the school still gets some revenue. So it's an opportunity for schools also to make up potentially some lost ticket revenue this year as well. So it's really cool. We're really excited to be affiliated with them. Check it out. It's the Small Player Big Play app, and you'll be seeing us talk more about them as we go.
Yeah, and I, as you illustrated, in the current climate, this app could end up being extremely huge for parents and grandparents and family and friends that want to see kids play, and the only way they can do it is through this app now, unless you have some other way of watching it. But no, very excited to have the app with us and looking forward to it. So guys, the Steelers arrived in Pittsburgh this week, and look, it's just an incredibly unique situation what's going on there. The Steelers have had two players go on what is called the reserve COVID-19 list. Arian Springs, who is a cornerback, defensive back, and then Justin Lane, third-round draft pick from last year, is also on the list. And to be clear, it means one of two things. It means that they have either tested positive for the coronavirus, or they have come into very close contact or had exposure with someone who has tested positive. So we do not want to say that either or both has contracted the virus, but at the same time, obviously, it's something we take pretty seriously. So, Ben, this has led to many players across the league opting out of playing this year. And we were kind of chatting just before we started recording here. We're seeing a lot of guys opt out, and it's everybody from a guy like Damian Williams, who was a star in the Super Bowl just this year for the Chiefs, and a lot of guys that would have been last on the roster type guys. What do you make of these guys that are opting out for this year?
You hit the nail on the head before. You talked about for a lot of these guys, there are safety concerns regarding their health or their family's health, and they want to protect their families. I know I'll butcher his name, but the guy from Canada, the Chiefs guard, Laurent Duvernay Tardif.
Tardif. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not going to say it right. He's a medical student. I don't think he's a doctor yet.
No, I believe he's a full-fledged doctor now.
Is he? I don't know if he passed his boards because he worked as an orderly at a hospital in Canada.
Okay.
And he decided to take the year off and work in the hospital, helping to combat this pandemic. And he said it was a difficult decision, but he's doing it. And he's an NFL starter.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got a lot of other guys. There are some guys that are undrafted free agents that have never played a down in the NFL, never had a day of camp, that are opting out. There are a handful of, 2 or 3 actually, not even a handful, of street free agents, guys that have bounced around the league for a couple or 3 years and are opting out. And it's, they don't say why they're opting out, whether or not it was a medical reason. James Conner and Cam Hayward both could opt out and take the medical stipend if they wanted, because Connor's a cancer survivor and Hayward has asthma, and neither one of them are opting out. And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm not taking a position on that. I'm just saying they could, and they get $350,000 this year versus the $150 for they're referring to it as the voluntary opt out. But that stipend, people need to realize, is a salary advance. It's not just free money. It's money paid out as as an advance toward future wages. So my question is, and I'm still unclear on this, if you're an undrafted free agent and you opt out to take the $150,000 in free money because you're probably a long shot to make the team anyway, you have to pay it back. It doesn't make any sense to me that they would just go ahead and pay these guys $150,000 to do nothing when the chances they were going to make the team were slim to none, frankly, especially in a year like this, where they're only going to have like 2 weeks of actual hitting and no preseason games. I don't know how, the Tuzar Skippers of the world and guys like Ola Adeniyi, those guys have no shot this year. I mean, none. And maybe that's why they opted out. They said, screw it. I don't really have a shot anyway. I'm just going to take the year off and work hard and try again next year. I don't know. But it's been interesting seeing who can opt out. And they still have, I believe they have until next Wednesday to opt out.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
It was 7 days from when it was fully exercised. The agreement was fully exercised between the NFLPA and the NFL. And I believe it was signed by the NFLPA on Tuesday of last week and the NFL the following day. So,
yeah, I think you're correct in that, because that also begins that kind of second phase of this 3-phase training camp thing. Yeah. This first week was supposed to almost be strictly COVID testing, like 3 straight days. The final day of it, like next Tuesday, I think was supposed to be get your actual team physical, get your equipment, and then come back the next day and we start conditioning and doing a little bit more. Now the Steelers, it's no secret, Steelers.com and I think the Post-Gazette, they've been showing photographs and videos of the guys running around Heinz Field and doing stuff. And I don't know, Ian, is that a good idea right now? I mean, these guys are still technically in the testing phase, and they're supposed to have 3 positive tests before they can really do too much. I hate to play doctor, but should they be doing that right now?
So I'll play devil's advocate and say that it's safer to be outside running around than it is to be indoors with people, because you're at least a little farther away. You get some fresh air and you get a little bit of breeze blowing, and kind of disperses the air around you. So,
true.
I'm also not a doctor, and I'm not even going to try and play one on the podcast. So I mean, is it a good idea? It's probably better than sitting around in rooms with people, but it's about when they would have been starting training camp anyways. Actually, they probably would have started sooner if the preseason would have happened as normal, because they would have had the Hall of Fame game coming up in a few weeks. So, it's good to get in a rhythm, and especially, they said Ben hasn't really thrown full bore yet, but you got to work on the timing with the receivers a little bit too, and even just tossing the ball around the yard, getting used to throwing to guys as they're running is another thing. So it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, is that the initial thought process was that these guys were supposed to just be in virtual type meetings this week outside of being at the facility to be tested. So getting outside is good, and I mean I didn't exactly see them all huddling up or anything like that, so I don't think there's too much to cry about here. But Ben, is your understanding that with the 2 players, Springs and Justin Lane, do they have to now be quarantined away from everybody for 14 straight days? Is that where they're at right now?
Yeah, they have to self-isolate for 14 days. And, obviously the Steelers can't hire a babysitter, but they've been advised not to be around anyone at all, including their families. So they can't come around their teammates at all. They cannot come around the coaches, the teammates, the trainers, the facility, nothing. And obviously, they're talking to them. They're in contact with them constantly. So,
and I think they can still be part of meetings, things like that, obviously virtually. But Mike Tomlin kind of hit the national press today because he was asked about this whole thing, and he said basically that he told his team, he said, if you fail, we fail.
If one fails, we all fail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I it's a very blunt, honest, true statement. And you look at, you look across the spectrum right now, you look at what's happening with the Miami Marlins in baseball. They literally went from 2 positive, 5 positive, 7 up into the teens, and now the Buffalo Bills, there's a report tonight that they've had 4 or 5 guys go on their reserve COVID list. This is not going to be easy. I mean, Ian, what are your thoughts that this season actually happens? Do you think that they're going to get it in or not?
I'm hopeful they do.
Sure. Yeah.
I think with part of the agreement they came to was sort of a expansion of the ability to bring guys back from injured reserve, or not even injured reserve, but the COVID list, I'll say. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we may see a lot more players go out for a month or so maybe 2 months during the season, depending on kind of how things work. But I think Mike Tomlin's key point was, if we all follow the protocols and do what we're supposed to do, right, we can kind of help the season to happen. One of the things with the Marlins was part of the story was that a bunch of players kind of left the team facility and went out to a nightclub when they were in Atlanta. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And I mean, you want to look at an extreme example, look at what the NBA is doing. Like if one of the guys had to leave the bubble to like go to a family member's funeral, and he had to come back and self-isolate for 10 or 14 days after he came back into the bubble. So, I mean, if that's what it takes, but, this will probably kind of help them be more accountable to each other as a team and actually grow as a team if they're all holding each other accountable. And I think that's part of Tomlin's message too, that, we're all in this together and we got to hold each other accountable. That like, if someone calls you up and says, hey, let's go out and do whatever tonight, like you got to tell them not only, no, I'm not going with you, but you better not go either, because if one person slips up, then it endangers the whole team.
Yeah, and I think it was it Lou Williams in the NBA that he also had a legit reason to leave the bubble, and then of course photos surfaced of him at a strip club.
Yeah,
I mean, look, we laugh, but what I know, it's gonna happen in the NFL. It might not be a strip club per se, but somebody's gonna do the opposite of the other 52 guys on the roster, and it's not gonna go well. But it's just, again, I keep coming back to it. It's just the world we are currently in right now, with all this going on. From a football aspect, Ben, the Steelers signed Wendell Smallwood this week, running back, and a guy that back in 2016 had a pretty decent game against the Steelers, week 3, I believe it was, 76 yards on like 17 carries and a touchdown. Did you see a need for this guy? Did he just come cheap enough? I mean,
I think he just came cheap enough. He played in Washington last year, and he barely got on the field. The year before that, he played well in Philly in 2018, well enough that he was kind of like a sought-after, fantasy football piece. I don't really know how to score fantasy, so don't even listen to what I'm saying. But based on what I've read, that's the case. They also signed a corner today who was a key backup for the Raiders last year. He actually started 3 games. Curtis Riley, he's a corner. He's 28, started 3 games for them last year. He's kind of bounced around the league a little bit. I can't imagine he's going to compete for much playing time. But, if there's an opportunity to sign a guy that is going to improve the depth on your unit, you're going to bring him in and you're going to see what you can do. And as in particular, right now with Justin Lane being out, and missing 2 weeks, they need another guy in there. So they went ahead and they grabbed Curtis Riley today, and they're going to insert him into the mix and see where things go. I feel that all the guys that are coming in off the street and have no idea how the system works, don't know the scheme, don't know the calls, don't know the verbiage, they're at a tremendous disadvantage this year, because you don't have much time to pick that up. And if you can't assimilate all that information very, very quickly, you're just not going to be the guy this year. They're just going to go, we're going to go with what we know. I think that's really going to be the case. Even the rookies, they're at a huge disadvantage by comparison to most rookies coming in. Most rookies coming in, especially if you're a high pick, you've got a chance to earn playing time as a rookie. This year, nah, not much. You're not going to play much for the first month, at least, because you're still learning. You're not really going to know what the heck is going on. You may spend the whole season, as Tomlin puts it all the time, trying to catch up with a moving train. Everybody's moving faster. Everybody's moving forward faster than you can, because you don't understand the processes, and you're trying to catch up. And you may spend the entire season doing that. So it's going to be interesting, man. I hope, you alluded to it before. I hope, obviously, that we have a football season. If we have no fans in the stands at all, but we still have football, hey, that's better than no football, man. That's the way I feel about it. I had planned on going to the Philly game in Pittsburgh this year. Events have conspired and I've lost my tickets. One pair from a friend who decided that he was going to go ahead and give his back to the Steelers because a lot of people were going to be disappointed. So he just went ahead and said, "Okay, I'll give you mine." And I bought another pair on NFL Ticket Exchange.
Uh-huh.
They didn't even send me a note and say, "Yeah, by the way, you're losing your tickets." They just refunded the money. Boom. I'm like, well, I bought trip insurance on these tickets. Can I turn those in and get the insurance? Maybe I should ask.
Inquiring minds.
It sucks. Doesn't sound like I'm going to be going to Pittsburgh for the game. There were some other things we wanted to do while we were there, and air travel is kind of a concern at this point. Certainly. I don't know that I necessarily want to do that. We talked about this before on another show where air travel would be a lot more concerning to me than spending 3 hours in an outdoor stadium with a mask on. I'm
absolutely
much less concerned about that than spending all day on an airplane in an airports, which are filthy.
Yeah.
So
I'm totally with you on that.
It's gonna be a weird season, man. That's the point. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, I think. I guess if you put a gun to my head, I think there's going to be games. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're going to be able to get through an entire season, because I do think it's going to be fascinating. And Ian, I was going to ask you about this. Is this where Kevin Colbert is really going to have to earn his money? Because you literally could be looking to pluck guys off the street on a daily basis just to fill holes because you might have guys that are testing positive or are exposed. I mean, is there some truth to that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. And I think this also gets to, how broadly the Steelers tend to scout. There's been guys that they've brought in. I mean, Minka was a great example, but other guys they've brought in that they said, oh yeah, we talked to this guy at his pro day. We liked him a lot. We met him at the combine and, he just became available. So we went out and got him. That, they scout these guys from the time they're in college, kind of all the way through, and even keep tabs on them when they're in the pros, that if they become available, they know the guys they like and will go out and get them. Some of them, like Minka, work out great. Some of them, like, what was his name? Gilbert, the kid that got drafted by Cleveland and then came here for a disastrous year.
Gilbert.
Yeah. Some don't work out. So, it is what it is, but they, if they find guys they like, they keep tabs on them. So, and I think to Ben's point also, much to the chagrin of Steelers Twitter, you're going to see guys like Jordan Dangerfield and Dan McCullers and maybe even Marcus Allen make the roster this year, just because, as Tomlin calls them, they're the been there, done that guys that have played in this defense before, know what the calls are, and can get on the field and, I don't want to say execute them, but they can get on the field and understand what's going on at least. So, you're probably going to see a lot more veterans make the roster than you maybe typically would in a normal season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
They're less likely to make those mental mistakes that kill you.
Yeah,
no, that's true.
They're just they're going to have a higher comfort level with those guys that know the system.
You are listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast, presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida, serving Broward County and the southern Palm Beach counties. Whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos, contact Deck Roofing today by visiting deckroofing.com. The NFL Top 100 came out this week, guys, and I know you were sitting on pins and needles while you were waiting for that. Much in the same way that Ben sits on pins and needles waiting for the Madden ratings to come out every year.
That's important.
The Steelers, I think, what do we have? 3 guys on that list? TJ and
Minka and Cam, and that's it.
And Cam, yeah, and there was a report that DeCastro was like 102 or something like that. Ben, please share with us your feelings about these rankings.
They don't mean shit. I don't know why people get so upset about it. It's like every year people get up in arms about how these lists and these ratings are crap. And it's like, they're crap every year. Why do you go on about this? Of course they're crap. I mean, Madden even acknowledges that their ratings suck. Their scores suck. And they do so by saying, yes, we're putting these out now, but we reserve the right to change these in season as these players show more or show less. So, the NFL top 100 list is the way that's made is just dumb. They don't go out and poll the entire league and ask them for their top 20 players. They ask the guys that visit NFL Network studios to fill out a list of their top 20 players in no particular order.
Yep.
Just give us your top 20 players. And then they take the votes, and whoever gets the most votes, that guy's number 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. I can tell you with a great deal of confidence that there are not 100 guys better than David DeCastro, who is the Steelers' best offensive lineman by far. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that with certainty. The fact that Bud Dupree didn't make it shocks the hell out of me. Anybody else really notable that you thought was left off the list?
Maybe.
Huh?
There's always an argument for Pouncey. I think it's past him, but everybody's still.
I think Pouncey was a serviceable center last year. I think he had a really bad year by Pouncey standards.
I agree.
That's not to say he's not a starting caliber center in the NFL. He is. Some people just talk about him like he's trash. That's not true.
No,
he's just not. He's not the dominant guy, or wasn't last year the dominant guy that we're used to seeing. He had a bad year. He made the Pro Bowl on reputation. It happens. You see it every year.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, Pouncey, I don't know. Deontay Johnson, maybe not. DeCastro for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Hayward, Tuitt can't stay healthy, so probably not.
Well, the best thing about the fact that baseball is playing and soccer and basketball, I think, started its season again officially tonight, and hockey. The best thing isn't necessarily that those things are on TV now. It's that sports talk shows no longer have to come up with these ridiculous lists every single day to discuss. And so I am glad about that. But, it's like I tell my son with Madden ratings when he says something about how can they do that to TJ Watt? He's way better than an 85 or whatever they've got him. I just tell him, well, they do that so he can improve, and you get all those extra bonus points or whatever the hell it is on your game, Again, not a big deal. We don't really follow it much. Did I end up seeing Lamar Jackson was rated number 1 overall? I'm sorry. He's not better than Patrick Mahomes. But, again, these lists are what they are. Yeah, Ian, you were talking about stadiums. Best place you've seen a football game at any level, and what is your favorite? Do you have one?
Boy, it's a fun little topic, Yeah. I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for Three River Stadium for all the flaws that it had, because I grew up going to games there. I've seen a few games at Beaver Stadium at Penn State that were, just packed houses, and you're crushed in there like sardines. It was a really cool environment. And we've got some really cool little local stadiums here too, with high school stadiums too. That some big complexes that are cool, but also ones that have railroad tracks going by right next to them, and you can see trains go past too. That those small little schools have some fun ones too. So I think I think my dream stadium to see a game in would be the Rose Bowl. I've always had an affinity for the Rose Bowl. Maybe just growing up watching Big Ten football, that the Rose Bowl is the pinnacle. You want to make it there.
Right.
I'd love to go there sometime, but I think I'd probably say Beaver Stadium's been my favorite one that I've been to. But there's a lot of cool stadiums that I've been to.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Rose Bowl and wanting to go there. I mean, Michigan's been wanting to go there for 20 years, and that ain't happening. So I thought I'd slander my Maize and Blue there just a little bit.
I guess because I didn't, so you had to.
Right. I figured it was coming. Ben, you've been to some cool stadiums. I know you went and saw the Steelers in Seattle a couple of years ago, and you've talked about how crazy that was. Where else have you been?
Arrowhead is the best pro stadium I've ever been in.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That was incredibly loud too. It's an old stadium, but they just keep updating it.
Yeah.
So, the amenities are good. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to need a new stadium there. I mean, it's been a while since I've been there, but they just keep adding to it and updating it and making it better continually. That was a really, really nice stadium. Yeah, Seattle's a nice stadium, no question. Three Rivers was a dumpy stadium, but I agree with that with Ian from a sentimental standpoint.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, that place shook. It was so loud. It was fantastic. I loved it and I miss it. And the fact that that Heinz is open on one end and it lets so much sound out.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea was that you'd be able to look out over the water and see whatever. A closed stadium would be better in my mind. I have not been to the Rose Bowl, Ian.
No.
The football stadium at the University of Arizona is nothing to write home about at all.
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of games there. Autzen.
I was going to say, did you make your way to Autzen yet?
Yeah. Not a great stadium. It's got a reputation for being loud and a difficult place to play because the fans are so close to the field. There is no track around it like you see in a lot of college stadiums, and the sidelines aren't real wide, for lack of a better way to put it. They're not real deep. Okay. So the fans are pretty close to the field. That part's kind of cool, but I don't think it's all that great a stadium. I'm sure Ducks fans will disagree with me, but they're wrong about a lot of things.
I did see a game at the old Pitt Stadium too, and that was nothing to write home about either. I mean, people around here loved it because it was on campus.
How old are you? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. When did that thing go away?
They moved into Heinz Field when Heinz got built, so that was early 2000s.
Okay, I thought they played at Three Rivers too for a little while. No.
I don't remember. I saw them. I saw the Pitt play Penn State. I think it was the last year that Pitt Stadium was around.
Okay.
And I'm 34, but not that matters. Actually, I will say probably the coolest place that I've seen anything happen was Bristol Motor Speedway. I went to a few of the night races there, and they have played football games there.
They have, yeah.
And the way that NASCAR track is laid out, like a lot of car racing tracks, I've been to Indianapolis Motor Speedway, not to see a race, but I visited the museum and walked through some of the track there and stuff.
Yeah, that's like 2 miles around, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so big that you can't see like the far end of the track or the far side of the track from the grandstand. Right. So they have like TVs, and a lot of tracks are like that, or things get so small. But like Bristol's only a half-mile track. And I mean, they can pack 250,000 people into that stadium. And but there's not a bad seat there because like the track sits down in a bowl so low that like, even if you're right up against the screen, you can still see the other side of the track. Or if you're way up at the top, you can still see the other side. So there's not a bad seat in Bristol, and it was a really cool place to see. I saw races there, but they've played football games there too.
Yeah, I think like Tennessee and Virginia Tech played there a couple years ago.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
For me, Lambeau was unbelievable. I mean, you got to go to a game at Lambeau. It's just all. I mean, and I was there on December 22nd or December 23rd. I can't remember then.
Oh, chilly.
It was
due to Troy ran the fumble back for a touchdown.
Yes. No, it wasn't. This was just a couple years ago. Longer than that now. Maybe 2014.
Was that the illegal bat game? Where was that Ziggy Hood that batted the ball and they call it?
It was in the snow. Yeah. Both teams had just long shots of making the playoffs, and neither did, if I can remember. Although the Packers might have squeaked in, but but Rodgers was hurt, so it was Matt Flynn. And Ben, of course, played, and we won a thriller. It was like 38-31. But it snowed the whole game. It was about 28 degrees. And Ben, you mentioned, was it cold? It was cold, but I had enough adult beverages in me where it really didn't matter. But I just remember going in there, and I remember sitting down, and this woman taps me on the shoulder behind me, and I turn around, and she's probably, I'm going to guess, early 70s. And she's all in her green and gold and got makeup on, and I'm just a diehard Packers fan. And she says to me, "Is this your first time at Lambeau?" And I said, yeah, it is. And she says, "Well, on behalf of all of us, we'd like to welcome you to our stadium." And I said, "Oh, thank you very much. It's very nice." And she says, "I hope you enjoy it. I just want you to know we're going to kick your ass." And
Respect.
I started laughing, and she says, "Well, did you think I was going to be nice the whole time?" And it was a great experience. I mean, besides the snow and the cold and everything else, and besides the Steelers winning the game, it was a great atmosphere. And I highly recommend, if you ever get a chance to go to a game there, do it. Of course, I've been to Michigan Stadium many, many times. It's completely overblown. Yes, they pack 113,000 people in there, but it's not nearly as difficult a place to play as people make it sound out to be. But that said,
that you left there underwhelmed because every time you leave that stadium, you're disappointed.
Well, I had a pretty good run going in the late 70s through the 90s. I had a good run at Michigan Stadium where we never lost. And then Dennis Erickson brought his Miami Hurricanes into Ann Arbor. They were ranked number 1. And I want to say this was 1989. Michigan led 30-15 with like 6 minutes to go and blew it. We gave up 16 points in the final 5 minutes, lost by 1. After that, it's never been the same. So, good stuff there for sure. Before we start closing things down, I did want to go back to another Steelers topic, and that Steelers topic is Matt Canada.
The Canadias.
The Canadias. He is officially titled as the quarterback's coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now,
actually
last year,
titled as the yes, actually, not officially, actually.
Right. Yes,
quarterback's coach. And there was a great need to hire a quarterback's coach.
There was, because Randy Fichtner had taken on both the offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach, and it's just too much. It's too much to do. And
especially when you've got 2 young quarterbacks.
Yes.
And the lack of individual attention that they're receiving was evident in their play last year. They were terrible. Mm-hmm. They were awful.
So my point is this. A lot of Steelers fans seem to be under the impression that Canada is there like as this secret agent man to completely redo the Steelers offense or something like that. And I'm at the point, I have an article ready to go, I think, for tomorrow about this. But Ben, you're kind of talking about it. So, I mean, why should Steelers fans temper their expectations that he's the guy in waiting and all this other stuff as far as OC?
Well, maybe he will be the guy in waiting, but you need to look
at it
from the big picture standpoint, okay?
Yeah.
Number 1, Ben Roethlisberger's 38 years old. He's not learning a new offense. It ain't happening, okay? No. So they're not changing the scheme this year.
Nope.
Number 2, you look at Tomlin's record as a head coach and what he does when he brings in position coaches. Even Mike Munchak initially didn't have a great deal of pull when constructing the game plan. That grew over time. Okay. And this is a guy who was a head coach, position coach, Hall of Famer as a player, and basically a very good running game coordinator, for lack of a better way of describing it. I mean, that's what Munchak's strength was.
Right.
And over time, in particular, when Fichtner became the offensive coordinator, because they'd been offensive assistants together and had a lot of conversations, Fichtner valued his input even more than Todd Haley did. And what Munchak did was come in and say, hey, this is what my guys do well. This guy does this well. This guy does this well. And looking at the film of the other team, this is what they have a hard time defending. So why don't we do this? And that was his input into the game plan. And we should probably discuss kind of the way a game plan is constructed. The offensive assistants get together with the coordinator on Tuesdays, and they talk about what they want to do. And Randy's already got a game plan put together in his mind, and he's presented to them, and they say, yes, and let's try this too, or let's kick this out, or let's whatever. And it's up to Randy at the end of the day to decide what he wants to do. Then on Wednesday, he takes that to his starting quarterback, to Ben Roethlisberger, and says, hey, here's what we want to do. We're going to do X, Y, Z. And Ben talks about which plays he's most comfortable with. And then they install the game plan on Wednesday. And a lot of those practices, Ben doesn't practice. But still,
that's true.
Ben has more say in the game plan than the individual position coaches. And Ben is 38, and Ben has been in the same offense now for what, 7 years? They're not making him learn a new one. And Randy Fichtner has job security until Ben retires. I keep telling you guys, he's not getting fired. It isn't going to happen. You can wish for it all you want. Right. It ain't going to happen. And Matt Canada coming in, he may be an offensive coordinator in the future. Who knows?
Yeah.
What I can tell you is this year, given the constructs that are already there and the limited amount of time we have where they're actually going to practice a whole whopping 2 weeks before the season starts, he's not going to have that much input. It's not going to have his words are not going to have that much gravity this year. It just isn't going to happen because there's a lot of stuff going on. They hired him. They hired him because they needed to hire a quarterbacks coach to give those young quarterbacks individual instruction because they played terrible. They were terrible last year, and it was a glaring need. And they brought him in because he's a quality coach. Yeah. And who knows? He may be the offensive coordinator when Fichtner's done. And I personally think that as soon as Ben Roethlisberger retires, Fichtner's done. He'll either get retired or he'll retire.
Agreed. Yeah. Ian, go ahead and close us out on this topic.
So you started by asking, what evidence do we have that Canada's not the secret OC? And I think it's that, they hired Terrell Austin last year to be a secondary coach / senior defensive assistant. And we didn't all of a sudden start running a 4-3 that Terrell Austin ran for years when he was in Detroit and Cincinnati. The secondary certainly played better with Terrell Austin as defensive backs coach. But we didn't dramatically change the entire defensive scheme. The secondaries changed their scheme a little bit, played a little more man-to-man, a little more press, but the whole defensive scheme didn't change. The one place where I think Canada maybe could have some influence is, and they do this a lot more when Ben is under center, but Canada's offenses have always used a lot of pre-snap motion with multiple players moving and doing some crazy things. And there's limits on what you can do there in the NFL, but teams like the Chiefs have really used that to create not only identify defenses for quarterbacks, but create mismatches, with getting guys like Tyreek Hill on linebackers or even getting some of their running backs in favorable matchups too. So I could see, if if Canada gets Ben's ear talking about matchups and says, hey, let's try and, get this guy in a favorable matchup here by sending guys in motion. I could see them using more motion in the offense this year, but I think that's about the limit of Canada's influence.
I think you made a very good point before when you talked about the fact that they already do a lot of motion when Ben's involved. By contrast, last year they used practically none. And the reason they used practically none was those young quarterbacks that couldn't keep track of what was going on the field. And if you started moving the pieces around, they were going to have no idea where their receivers were when the ball was snapped. I feel strongly that everything that was lacking, everything's the wrong way to put it, 90% of what was lacking in the Steelers' offense last year was caused by the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks were awful. They were a liability. And especially at the end of the year, sorry, Duck, but at the end of the year, before that too, defenses lined up and basically dared our quarterbacks to beat them. And it wasn't difficult for them to beat our quarterbacks.
No, it wasn't, and you're absolutely right. And hopefully, with a QB coach involved, it'll be better.
They'll get better.
Yeah,
they will benefit by it, and I feel good for those kids, because they needed it. They do.
They did. And with that, we'll wrap it up right there. This has been the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.